After that also, whenever I made criticism of him, the fact him not being in touch, he then started advertising congressman on your corner. I thought, well, great, fantastic. But then when you read about it, now everybody else, this is how Congressman on the Corner works, because I used to do, as a state representative, had office hours in different areas. For instance, when I didn't have an office in Pinckneyville, I went to Pinckneyville and would announce in the local paper that I'm going to be in the courthouse for office hours from such and such a time to such and such time. Me. Congressman on the Corner is just that. It's basically office hours for the congressman. That's why it's called Congressman on the Corner. If you do something different, then you let him know. But every one of the ones that he had, from what we can tell, it wasn't Congressman on the Corner, it was Congressman staff on the corner. And the best example I had of that was whenever I met with the mayor of Johnson City, and he and I were talking. He says, well, the congressman said he was going to have Congressman on the Corner, so a bunch of us came over. He said he had 2 staffers here. He said, I went to one of the staffers and told her, well, I thought the congressman was going to be here. And she says, well, you know, he couldn't be here. I said, okay. He said, and first off, probably not the answer she should have given, but this is what she gave, and you can check with the mayor. But he said, I bet Bill doesn't even know where Johnson City is, does he? She goes, probably not. That's not the way to represent the people. It's tough. It's tough. It takes away from time from family, I know. It takes away from time that you might want to be doing other things, but you're asking for the job. Eric Cantor, and that's a prime example of you can get so tangled up in the Beltway that you don't pay attention to what's happening in the district. And that's why Eric Cantor is not going to be Speaker. He's not going to be any, well, that's not true. He's going to make a lot of money from what I hear, but that's a whole different story. but that's the rub. You've got to be, though it's congressman, it is U.S. representative. And I just think that we've been shorted of it.
There's a lot of money being spent on this particular campaign by both national committees and PACs and this, that, and the other thing. Why is this a good thing?
I don't know it's a good thing. It is a thing. It is what our politics are nationwide right now. Everything's reported. I think the most bizarre thing about the campaign finance reform is that you can't have input on a lot of this stuff. I mean, the state of Illinois, you do have input, but you report everything. And I thought maybe that would be better, but I've about decided that it's pretty much an incumbency protection plan they put in place whenever I see it. Now, that doesn't mean others can't win it. It's just not. But, well, one thing it's good for is for advertising. It's really wonderful. People can make money and do all that. As you and I were joking, it's good for my grandkids to be able to see me when I'm not around. They get to see me every day on TV. But I wish there was some more input from the individual candidate. There's been some things said that I maybe wouldn't have said, and there's probably some things that were said about me that maybe Bill wouldn't have said. But so that's the bad side. The reality is it costs a lot of money to get the message out. You know, when you start buying television in St. Louis market, I'm used to the Paducah market, and $60 a point in comparison to $600 a point. And it takes a lot of money to get the message out and get your name recognition up and get all of those things to occur. And so, they all come in. Now, from my standpoint, I'm glad they are in, because if they weren't, obviously I wouldn't have a chance of winning this race. I just wouldn't. I don't know how you can change that, though, without violating freedom of speech, when we've looked over the things over the years. I'm a little concerned, like I said, though, about the super PACs and all that I went around, what was voted on, it's the rules I gotta live in. So, it's where we live.
Jobs are obviously a major topic given the unemployment rate in Southern Illinois or whatever. What will you try to do in Washington to try to create a better atmosphere?
Fantastic. And there's about 5 different areas, okay, if not more. One is what I talked about with the EPA. We've got to make sure that the EPA comes off those proposed rules and actually allows our coal mines and our coal-fired power plants to continue to work. It doesn't make sense. Now, I'm all for free trade or for being able to send our coal other places because that's where the only market we've got right now. But it doesn't make sense to ship our coal to India and China to burn it in coal-fired power plants that have no scrubbers, where we could burn it here and put it in the same atmosphere and at least have it scrubbed, right? That's just my thought on that. So that also, when we start talking about oil and our ability to make ourselves independent, if the Keystone Pipeline comes in and is pushed for, and get the president to release it and get now understand the Keystone Pipeline, part of it is already there, the Keystone, but this is the Keystone XL. Okay, the XL comes over, it goes down through Wood River, it actually dumps right off into the Wood River refinery, 1Y off there, and then goes over north of Mount Vernon. So you got 2 locations, not only the construction jobs that will come along with that, but here's what's really wild, that one, the flow of that crude oil to be processed and what it would do to our fuel rates and the ability to be independent. But then also, people don't understand this, right now we have a booming grain season. But the cost of moving the grain is elevated because so many of the vehicles are used to transport the fuel, or the crude oil, not being able to get a cheaper price to transport the grain. That's from, my going out and meeting with everybody and talking with people at actually, where that information came from was with the farmers at Evansville, where they're loading onto barges. And the concerns that they have, and they showed exactly the breakdown on their grain prices on the transportation cost in comparison. So you'd have the safest, fastest transportation of the crude oil. You'd have the jobs of the creation for when that all is turning up. Then all of a sudden, the refinery that is ready to handle that load has already been put in place. $4 billion worth of construction. It was right there at Phillips. We were there yesterday. And so it's ready to take that extra load, even though some of it's getting there now, it's taking longer for it to get there. So that's that. One other thing, and there's more than this, but another concern is the Granite City right now has a concern with Granite City Steel because of what has occurred in our tariffs not being placed on incoming steel from China and from, I think it's North Korea, China and one other country coming in. What it's doing is, because those tariffs are not put in place, even though they're already passed into law, the administration is not putting those in. What happens is it causes cheaper steel to be dropped in, which causes a decline in the ability for our workers to keep working. And we've got to make sure that if we've got tariffs put in place, that the administration continues to use them and wisely, so that we keep our workers working. The other issues, Scott Air Force Base. If any legislator or anybody running for this office doesn't say they wouldn't support Scott Air Force Base and understand what it does, what Scott Air Force Base does, and that's this, but then there's other ways we can look to try to expand what occurs there. One, we're centrally located in the United States. Two, I'm a Marine, and I was part of the Marine Air Wing. But you can't transport anything from any military branch without a communication through Scott. That's how big Scott is. All control of goods and movement comes through Scott, through their communication system. We've got to protect it, not just for the jobs, but for what it does for the nation and for for our military. And SIU. You know, we've got to understand where we're at. The majority of it is state involvement. We have to, the legislator has to be aware at all times of what's going on with SIU, and understand how big of an economic engine it is. So there's many areas that you've got to watch for jobs, and that's what, there's no reason why the state of Illinois and why Southern Illinois isn't booming. I say that. There's reasons, but most of it is government involvement so heavy that it isn't allowed to grow.
You touched on SIU, which brings up the topic of college loan
Mm-hmm.
debt, the legislation that was passed a year or so ago. How can that be improved upon?
Well, I think it needs to be tied, and I don't know that for sure that it is. If it's tied with the interest rates right now, or is it a set interest rate? But you have to make sure that you keep the finger on the pulse of what is going on as far as where the interest rates are, and make sure that it is an affordable rate, so it just doesn't devastate someone to the point that they just throw their hands up and don't know what to do. Because what you want to remember about a college loan, it isn't like if you claim bankruptcy, you still got it. And so it's got to be to the point that the people can have that opportunity to pay them off, and not discourage others from becoming the best, become educated in the field of their choice.
But it applied to new college loans.
New college
was not retroactive.
It was not retroactive, and maybe there's something we need to look into as far as retroactive, because we're seeing so much. Yeah, it's rough. I'm, as a parent who helped pay for, of course, the reason why my son is that's not probably the only reason, but the reason why my son's in the Marine Corps was he came to me and said, "Dad, I'd really like to go to law school." I said, "Great, you figure out how to pay for it, you can." And he did. So.
We asked the congressman about the learning curve of being a first-term member of the U.S. House, and he said, maybe a year.
Yeah.
So what benefit, regardless of party policy,
right,
politics, what advantage would you imagine, and then someone who's been there would have?
Right. Let me tell you what advantages I would have, okay? One is, though dealing with different subjects, the ability to work with others across the aisle I've been able to do over the last 20 years very well. Some of my best friends are on the other side of the aisle, and some of my not so best friends are on my own side of the aisle. But you learn to work with people, and you learn the process, and the idea of going to Washington. Here's the advantage I have. A majority of the Illinois delegation I've served with and or worked with before, either as members of the Illinois General Assembly or as they were staffers. For instance, Rodney Davis, I actually helped him run when he was very, very young for state rep, and then he later became a staffer for us, and then went to D.C. and was worked with John Shimkus and others. Randy Holgren, Peter Roskin, and I became members of the Illinois General Assembly together. John Shimkus, I know him because he came in about the same time I did as far as that was concerned. And even on the other side of the aisle, even to the point of Jan Schakowsky, I don't know, we didn't work a whole lot together when we were in the Illinois General Assembly, but at least I could talk to her. We were going to be like this because we're just that much different in our philosophies. But I think the advantage of being able to come in with that experience, and the learning curve is still going to go straight up. It has to. Because we're now all of a sudden, I'm not talking about funding for our universities, I'm not talking about